Hello, everybody. Welcome to Happy Hour at the Hip Senior Live community. Today, we are back with Linda Aivalotis. Linda, welcome to Happy Hour.
Thank you very much. I love Friday happy hours. And I hope everyone who joins us learns to love happy hours too. And I hope that they can learn a lot during happy hours because it's not just about getting your drink on. With wine, a lot of people look at it as life. It's a lifestyle, a wine lifestyle. Hopefully, people learn enough to get interested in wine and find out what a wonderful lifestyle it could be and not just about getting your drink on. So I'm Linda Aivalotis, also known as the Savvy Silver-Haired Wine Lady. I am trained through an institute called WESET. So it's the Wine and Spirit Institute or Institute Trust or Trust Institute. I'm sorry, got that backward. And I'm so far, and there's 4 levels. I'm a level 1, soon to be a level 2. Yay. And I love wine travel. And so I'm in the process of creating a company that allows me to take people with me on my wine travels. So I'm excited to get that off the ground very soon. So hopefully you will learn a lot during this call. This week, we are talking about how wine is made. And you might think it's just you squish some grapes and put the juice in a bottle and call it wine. It's not quite like that. It's close, but not quite like that. But first, let's talk about, I always invite everyone to bring a glass of wine with them to this session. I today have a red wine in a red wine glass. You can tell because of how big the bowl is on the glass. And it is from Italy. And there are over 10,000 different types of grapes, and this is just one. It's called Fico, and it's Montepulciano de Abruzzo. Now, I do not speak Italian, but this, I will tell you, is a really good grape. It's about mid-weight, so it's not too light like a Pinot Noir, but it's not really heavy like a Cabernet Sauvignon. It's right in the middle. So it's one of those wines that goes just about with any kind of food or snacks that you want to have, or what some people call a porch wine. You can just sit out on the porch in the summer in the nice breeze and drink a bottle of this wine. So
now, hold on one second, Linda. So before we get into this real deeply, I just want to give a little bit of a disclosure. So Linda and I are starting a program where we are going to be working with some retirement homes like CCRCs, some independent livings, and some stuff like that. So if you are part of one of those communities and you want to be part of what we've got cooking in the crock pot, let us know, because there's going to be some prizes involved and some interaction. We're going to be teaching some classes where you guys can bring your communities together. We're going to stream live into your place, give you a great lesson, allow you to have some happy hour activity as well with that. So if you're an activity director or anything, please reach out to me, Marian at thehipsenior.com. My email is right there on my picture. And so reach out to me, let me know that you want to be part of it, and we can put you on the list so that you're invited. What kind of wine that we're going to have in the next 2-3 weeks going out as well. Please reach out to me and let me know your interest levels, and we can talk about the program at that point. So now with that, with ahead, I wanted to put that above the cut, above the fold. Get that out for everybody, and then I will give it back to you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do an addition onto that. So next week will be our first, September 8th, will be the first time that during this class, we're going to be profiling a specific wine. So if you would like to have that particular wine, it is going to be a Sauvignon Blanc from Napa Valley. So it doesn't have to be the brand, a particular brand. And the brand that I'm going to do is Barnhard brand, Sauvignon Blanc, Napa Valley. Doesn't have to be this particular brand. It can be any brand as long as it's a Sauvignon Blanc from Napa Valley. You can bring that bottle with you to happy hour next Friday, and we're going to go over we're going to actually dig into that wine. And as we go through these different classes, you'll understand why making sure that we're getting a wine from the same region of the world is so important. So next week, we're going to be profiling Sauvignon Blanc from Napa Valley. So get a bottle of one of those, bring it with you to the meeting or to the class, and we'll talk all about it and learn
And
all about
you
it.
know what? Grab 2 or 3 of your friends. Don't drink this bottle alone. Don't drink alone if you don't want to. Grab a couple of your friends, sit around the computer, learn about wine, and like a book club thing, but wine club. There we
Mhm.
go. That's where we're going to start is a wine club thing with that. Come to happy hour, like I said, with your friends. And if 2 or 3, 4 of y'all are together and share a bottle of wine, that makes it even more fun for you and for us. Keep that in mind. Invite your friends over. Don't be alone.
Yep, absolutely. And each bottle so very easily serves 4 people. So 4 glasses of wine come out of 1 bottle. So you and 3 friends split a bottle.
Or they
How
can
fun would
order a case.
that? Order a case. That's right. Then hang out for the whole weekend.
Right.
All right. Okay. So let's get today's class started. So today we're going to talk about how wine is made, which is actually really interesting. So what a lot of people don't, I'm assuming, a lot of people don't think about wine starting out as an agricultural product. So I think we just see these bottles and we're like, oh, wine. Yay, I want some in my house. But we don't really go into a thought process of where the wine comes from. And it actually starts with your local wine grower. And we do have wine growers all over the United States. So every state has its own vineyards. You may not think that every state could grow vineyards, but I just took a trip through Arizona, and believe it or not, we found some great wine in the Arizona desert where they had their own vineyard and they were growing their own grapes along with pecans. I don't know how that works.
I would say, do they water them more, or are they hardier grapes that are
Yes.
resistant
I
to
think it's
the temperatures there?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think they are watering significantly more than you would almost
Right.
anywhere else in the United States. But I also think that wines that they chose were hardier grapes. They also were choosing, a lot of them were white grapes, which have a much shorter growing season than a red grape. So I think that way they didn't have to use as much water as they would with a red grape because it didn't have to stay on the vine quite as long.
Because all I'm
So
seeing is making raisinette wine turned into raisins, and we're doing wine out of that now.
and believe it or not, that is a way of making wine.
What?
And I'm going to go totally off track here, but in Puglia, Italy, which is right on the heel of the boot, or if you're looking the other way, I'm not sure which way it goes when you're looking in reverse. The heel of the boot is a region called Puglia. And there is a way that what they do with the grapes is they take the grapes and they harvest them and then they put them on racks and spread them out and let them dry out for up to 2 weeks. And what it does, instead of letting the wine age in the bottle, they let the juice age in the grape. And so it makes an awesome, really rich, it's almost like the wine has aged in the bottle for 3 or 4 years. How rich this wine is from just letting those grapes dry on racks. So yes, they do make raisinets out of them without the chocolate.
But imagine chocolate wine. Is that a thing?
It is a thing.
I know they have like vodka these days and all that other stuff, and we've talked about that in the past as well. And no, I think I have seen chocolate wine before. I think I've had chocolate wine. So,
Yes. I know. We're going down a really wrong path. But chocolate
we'll get back on track, guys.
I know. It's really good. All right. So when we think about that, it's actually an agricultural product. What makes or grapes really interesting is that once they're picked, they're not like bananas. how when you pick bananas and they're green and then you sit them on your counter and then they just keep ripening and ripening until they go brown and then you have to use them in banana nut bread. So they're that kind. Grapes do not do that. Grapes stop ripening as soon as you pick them. The major job or the most important job of the wine grower is to know his grapes, to know when the perfect time to pick them is. And when he determines the perfect time to pick them, that it's all hands on deck because they only have a limited, and it's like days, like 2 or 3 days at the most to get these grapes off the vines because then they just keep ripening and ripening and ripening on the vine. And you're not going to get the flavors that you want out of these grapes that you have to pick right at perfect ripeness. Now, what's really interesting, this is also the difference between some of the mass produced wines and then some of the smaller vineyards and how they handle it, or the more expensive wines, actually, even of the bigger mass producers. They will pick, some of them will start at like midnight to pick the grapes. They are usually hand picked, but not always. There are machines out there that can pick the grapes now, but hand picking is much gentler. So they use those. They put them in baskets. They take the baskets and they put them in a truck and they take them to where they're making the wine, to the barn. They take them to the barn as quickly as possible to get them out, to get them inside. So they don't pick during the heart of the day. That's the key. They have to pick. They start early in the morning because by the time the sun is rising and the heat starts to build, those grapes are continuing to ripen, and they don't want that to happen. So they are picking them fast and furious in the dark and in the early morning hours when it's still very cool. So this is
really love what you're doing to do that.
You would have to. You would have to, or get big bonuses. I don't know to be out here picking grapes at midnight. Yeah, you'd have to. Once they're taken to the barn, that's when they're actually handed over from the grower to the winemaker. Now, so the grower can be both, right? But he's putting on two different hats. He's the grower and he's worried about what's happening out in the vineyard. And then he switches hats, or she switches hats, because there's more and more women who are winemakers and vineyard owners, and they become the winemaker at that point. So the first thing they do is they decide whether or not they're going to remove the stems or keep the stems on. And you would think, why wouldn't you just always remove the stems? It's because the stems can actually add flavor and natural, healthy chemicals to the wine if they're left on. But not all wines work that way. Like a Pinot Noir does, but a Cabernet Sauvignon does not. So depends on the grape, depends on, even with that grape, if they're going to take them off the stems or not off the stems. So they have to make that decision. And what they're adding, so Cab Sauv, Cabernet Sauvignon grapes, have a lot of natural tannins in them. Pinot Noirs do not. So if they want to add the tannins, and tannins are the chemicals that your doctor is saying, drink red wine every day, drink a glass of red wine every day because of those tannins. Those tannins are really good for your heart. To take a Pinot Noir that is not naturally high in tannin and keeping those stems on will bump that tannin up in that particular wine, where a Cab Sauv is already high in tannins. You get too much tannin in a wine and it starts to get really acidic and really sticky, like sticky in your mouth. And if you don't want that to happen, then you're going to make sure that those stems are off. All right. So what they do then is, once they decide what they're going to do, if they're going to take the stems off, they put them on, it's like a conveyor belt. It's almost like a conveyor belt. So they'll put them on the conveyor belt and they'll start to then pick out the grapes they don't want because not all grapes are perfect in those clusters. Some have been smashed and some have been little bugs can eat them. Some of them can get overripe. Some of them just don't ripen properly. So they're picking out the bad ones on this conveyor belt. And then they go down the conveyor belt and they go into a great big vat. Now, here they make another decision. And the decision is, do we add yeast or do we let natural yeast start to work on the grapes? Because this is where they start to ferment them. And it's like letting them start to go bad is what it is. That when you think about it, you can make wine in your basement if you want. Same thing. So natural yeast, the thing with natural yeast is everywhere. It just because they're little bitty, tiny microscopic. Yeast is actually a microscopic bug. So it's a microscopic little microorganism, basically, or a little bug, if you want to look at it that way, that lives on the grapes. It lives everywhere. And
Even on our skin, right?
even on our skin. Yep. It's everywhere. So if you want to let them do their job, then you're going to just put the grapes in the big vat and then you wait patiently. The issue with natural yeast is you don't know how much yeast is sitting on those grapes. So you don't really have a timeline with them. So you just literally you're waiting patiently for those little microorganisms to eat the natural sugar of the grapes. And that's what they do. What they're doing, it's the fermentation process. They're taking and they're eating the natural sugar that is in the grapes and they're turning it into alcohol. So they're converting the sugar to alcohol. If a lot of So there are a couple different things they can do with this yeast. Sometimes they'll do the natural yeast and then they'll harvest it off the top because it rises to the top as it's fermenting. They'll gather it and then they'll save it for the next batch, where then they can introduce this natural yeast into the next batch. And they'll have a little bit more control then of the timeline because they know how much they're putting in. Or there are places where they can actually purchase yeast, just like you can. If you're going to make bread, you can go to the grocery store and get that little yellow packet of yeast and then make some bread. It's the same thing. They can buy little packages of yeast to put in with the grapes to get them going on a specific timeline. Natural yeast are more of they're more natural, right? So they're letting more.
That was very prolific there. They're more natural.
Yeah, they are more. Yeah, they're just the aromatics are usually much stronger with natural yeast than they are when you introduced a chemical yeast or a harvested yeast that they're they're keeping and then introducing into the next batch. So that's a lot of the reasons why they will go with the natural yeast if they want. So it's fermenting. And just like anything that is fermenting, you've probably had this in your refrigerator. You put a tomato in a little container in your refrigerator and you forget about it. And when you put it in the little container, it was a solid tomato and there was no juice in there at all. It was dry in that container except for the tomato, but it was whole and it wasn't dry. And you forget about it for a few weeks. And then you're like, oh, my tomato. And you open the lid and there it is.
Trying to make me not eat tomatoes more than I already hate them. You're putting bad pictures in my mind, woman. Stop it.
This happens with everything when it starts to break down. There's some juice in there. That's exactly what happens with grapes. Is the juice out of the grape? It starts to just come away from the skins. And that yeast helps it do that. So it's just that juice sitting in there with those skins. And what happens then is because those skins are becoming lighter and lighter because more and more juice is coming out of them, they're floating to the top. And What they have to do is they have to keep pushing it down to the bottom. When it floats to the top, they call that the cap. So they've got this cap of floating grape skins. So there's two ways they can do this. And this is where Lucy,
I was just
stomping
thinking
them,
about her.
came in. Yes. So what they do is they take this, it's like a giant potato masher, and they push all the grape skins back down to the bottom, or they will gently float back to the top. They do that 2 or 3 times a day, and they push them all back, and then they just keep rising to the bottom. And that, what that does is keeps those flavors, all those flavors mixing together. And so you don't get a little bit too acidity over here and not enough yeast over here eating. You're just mixing them up. Another way to do that is they actually connect a hose to the bottom of the tank, and they let the juice run into that hose. They turn around, they put it back on top and just spray it and just pour it back down. And then the pressure of that pushes those skins back down to the bottom. So they do that until they get the flavor and the color that they want. So this is,
So when they're doing that though, if they're spraying that back on versus just letting it, like if they spray it back on instead of just letting it flow into there, I'm guessing that aerates it more, and that would delay
Mhm.
some of the sulfites that I have such a problem with.
Yes, I would agree with you. I would agree.
Interesting.
Yep. So that's also the other thing, the difference between the hand-picked higher end or more natural wines, a natural vineyard, people who want to use natural processes in the vineyard. And we didn't talk about this, but if they are harvesting in the day, which they do with a lot of the mass produced wines, they are spraying them with sulfites over and over, because what sulfites do, and they're natural, sulfites are natural to so many fruits, especially dark fruits. There are sulfites in blueberries, there are sulfites in blackberries, there are sulfites in grapes, obviously. So those natural sulfites will slow that decomposition. But what they want to do is they want to stop that decomposition while it's still in the vineyard in the truck, right? So they're just spraying them down with sulfites to stop that decomposition until they can get them into the barn and into the tanks. So yes, you absolutely, if you're having issues with sulfites, you want to stay totally away from anything mass produced in any kind of alcohol situation, because if it's got fruit in it, you're getting sulfites in it. Absolutely. Not just the natural sulfites, you're getting chemical sulfites that are being sprayed on them while they're harvesting them. Because
Yeah.
all alcohol that I can think of is made from, starts with fruit
Not gin,
or gin.
not tequila.
Tequila. Tequila starts with
Cactus.
or cactus, which it's a fruit from the cactus.
That's not a fruit.
It's not a
Ferment.
fruit, but it's still, you can look at it. Okay, a vegetable. You want to look at it as a vegetable?
Yes.
Yeah.
100% is a
But-
vegetable. It's okay. It really is. But
Yeah.
gin that's made from, what is it then? Is it vodka that's made from corn? What's made from corn?
No, I think gin is made from corn. I don't know. I'm not into
Gin
the
is made
spirit
from
thing.
juniper berries.
Ah, okay.
I'm Googling while we're talking.
Yeah, maybe it is vodka that's made from corn. That's what I know. There's a potato vodka also. I think vodka is it can be made from a lot of different things.
It's just like the catch-all. Oh, I got some extra crop this week. We'll just make vodka.
Like out of it,
Corn is
Maybe.
commonly used to make alcohol in the form of ethanol, which is the type of alcohol that is used as a fuel source and in the production of alcoholic beverages. Okay, but it's not mentioning any specific.
Corn liquor. We know.
Corn whiskey.
There we go. Corn whiskey. Yep.
All right, wait a minute though. So I know we're supposed to be talking about wine, but what is vodka made out of? Hate when I'm on Zoom, my keyboard's no, I'm not going to work for you. Potatoes or fermented grains. So even there's
Green.
fermenting for Fermenting. That's the word going on.
Yeah. Yep. Potatoes. All right. Yes. That would be, I'd have to think about potatoes for a while. All right. So that's the fermentation process where it's actually just breaking itself down. It's a natural process. Like we talked about, bananas do it, everything does it. Once it's picked, it starts to degrade. And that's where the juices come from. But it depends on the grape. But usually, this fermentation process takes between 5 and 21 days. Although some can take up to 4 years. That's just like crazy. That's going to be like the toughest grape ever.
Right.
So to take 4 years to break down, I don't know which kind that is, but that's silly. That would be a very expensive wine. Whatever makes that. My head just went somewhere else. All right. So after fermentation, oh, I know. So the skins. So the skin, if they're leaving the skins in, sometimes they will pull them out more quickly than waiting till the end of the first fermentation, right? Because they're just wanting the color and some of the things. So sometimes they'll just pull the skins out early because they don't need them for what they're doing. They're just letting their juice then ferment, not necessarily the skins. All right. So what they do then, and this is really interesting. You know that hose we talked about at the bottom of the barrel? And we know that the skins rise to the top. So what that juice that's called is called free running wine. And they'll take it and they'll just basically turn on the tap and let all that free running wine come out and put it into another container. Then they take, if the skins are still in there, they'll take those skins out, and this is where they press them. And when they press them, they'll get another 15% of wine out of those skins. So those skins are still holding a lot. And it used to be that they didn't press them. They just let them go or would throw them away. But then they discovered how much they were getting. And that's where Lucy's stomping on the grapes. So once they get the free wine off, they let you go in and stomp on them if you want. And some winemakers still use the stomping method, believe it or not. They're not in tiny little containers like what she was in. They're in like 10 by 10 containers where you go in and stomp all around to get that extra 15% of the wine out of the grapes.
That's
so
crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. And so
I would imagine the FDA does not allow that to happen much in the US.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. All the tests you have to do on your feet, plastic bags on your feet, whatever. So instead of plastic gloves, you'd have plastic socks.
Right. Or those big, what are those big rubber pant things that go over your shoulders and all the way down to your feet when you're walking in the fields? Maybe they have sanitized versions of those for that.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But they get that other 15% out. So
that's a huge number. People think, that's just that's money. It's money in people's pockets. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, that is. Now, and then, so this is an old practice, but I've actually had some recently. The leftover skins are called a musk, M-U-S-K. And they take this leftover skin, some, not all, some of them, they do whatever. They're always out for every penny. Sell them to pig farmers or somebody else, something that they can be used for or eaten or whatever. But what they can also do is take them and put them in casks and add water to them and let them to continue to ferment gently for another few weeks. And this was actually used in Europe way back when. And it made a really light wine that then the field workers would drink on their breaks and stuff. And it's really good, better than just, I like water, but after drinking water all day, you get tired of no flavor in your water. So this is a way to get that really light, very low alcohol, because all that fermentation is pretty much done at that point. It's just a little bit more, just the very end of it. So really light, usually about 4 or 5%. alcohol in these really light wines. And I've had some and they are really good. So that just very similar.
So we have a question
Because,
popped up about that. And they wanted
okay.
to know, does wine normally have water put in it at any given point? And does it matter what kind of water it is?
And the answer is no. They do not dilute wine with water. Not the
Typical.
bottles that say wine on them. They
Yeah.
do not. If they say wine, there is no water. So that particular thing, and I had heard about it, but had never seen it. And it was canned actually. I'd never seen it bottled or canned before. But that particular kind they did. But it's at that point, it wasn't really a wine. It was, I forget what they called it. It had another name. It was just wine based, really. It's
Like how
flavored
we
wine.
make spritzers these days and stuff with sparkling water and stuff, probably, but just not sparkling.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. So there is a second fermentation that happens. And this is where you talk about the chocolatey. So those little microbes that are in there, they start to feast on the wine acids. And it's malic. It's called malic acid. They convert the sharp tasting malic acid into a creamier, chocolatey lactic acid. I'm not saying all chocolate wines are 100% lactic acid, but sometimes you'll taste a wine and you'll get that little chocolatey aftertaste in it. And that's what that is. It's from the second fermentation that causes that creamier or thicker, it's more full bodied really than a lot of wines. So it gives it a fuller body and then a creamier or chocolatey taste. And that's from that second fermentation that happens naturally in a normal wine.
So it doesn't
Well,
actually have chocolate in it?
it does not. No. And this is what's really amazing about wine is they don't add other flavors to it. So we'll go into this next week when we do our first tasting, when we profile wine, we're going to see what tastes familiar in it. So sometimes wines will taste a little fruity and not grapey. They'll taste, I taste a little melon, or I taste a little lemony, sometimes they'll taste like herbs. Oh, that tastes like an herb of some sort. I can't quite name that herb, but that's definitely an herb flavor I get in there. And it has nothing, no one puts herbs in the wine and no one puts chocolate in the wine, or no, it's just the flavor of the grape reminds you of these other flavors you're familiar with.
And I'm sure that's environmental, right? What other
Yes.
crops are around, what was planted in this field before, different stuff like that all contributes. What
Yeah.
kind of bees are pollinating stuff in the area,
Yes.
stuff like that contributes to the taste of these grapes being different.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's why, even though you have the same grape, like we're going to be tasting a Sauvignon Blanc out of Northern California, or Napa Valley, California, rather. If we were to taste a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand right next to it, you're going to get some of those same flavor profiles, but you're going to get also some different little notes that are going to come out. And it just has to do with geography more than anything else, climate, geography, and then some of the things that are done that the vintner does. So whether it was grown or where there used to be an apple orchard, whether it was grown in a really rocky area, those kinds of things all come into play, even though it's the same grape grown in different areas of the world it's going to have some similar flavor profiles, but then some different flavor profiles.
So not only is it agricultural, but it's a huge science as well, right?
Yes, very huge science, which is actually where the winemaker is so important. So more and more, winemakers are depending on science to know these things, to know when a grape is perfectly ripe. They can run a scientific test on it to see if it has reached its perfect ripeness.
So all these
So
seniors that were wine growers are sending their kids off to be scientists for college. Come back and now work for us as a scientist and make sure you know your stuff when you get back.
yes, yeah, and it would put them way ahead, because then you can just run these tests. You don't have to just go by your gut, right? Because you've got this scientific test to come behind you. And then you're not depending on that one person who's really good at it. So if dad is really good at knowing when to pick the grapes, and then dad decides he doesn't want to be a vintner anymore, or dad passes away, who's going to step into dad's shoes to know when the grapes are perfectly ready? And a lot of times that just doesn't happen, because dad got his information over decades of working in the vineyard. And
I would imagine that would if dad wasn't open to modern technology, that could create huge family feuds because of scenarios like, that's not how I want to run my business. I could see this being huge things in fields out there where dad doesn't want to run his business that way. People are like, look, you're one of these days you're going to retire, you're going to pass away, whatever. What happens to our business when that happens and you're not here with your master taste buds?
Yeah. And a lot of that is the taste bud. And your kid may not have, or whoever
doesn't want to or doesn't do.
Yeah.
You can mentor people your whole life, but sometimes if that gene wasn't passed on, you're out of luck.
Right. They just never may develop that skill.
I never thought of any of this. Interesting.
Yeah, that's where science comes in. Okay. So once they have run the wine off and stomped it out, or pressed it, or smashed it, whatever, out of the rest of the skins, they have this wine. It's baby wine at this point, because it's really not drinkable at this point. It's really young, because we're talking, it's only maybe a month old at this point. It's not drinkable yet. So they have to let it age. And to do that, they can put it in different vessels to let it age. And this also adds flavor to the wine. So wooden barrels is a way that I think a lot of people are familiar with. Wooden barrels, concrete, glass, clay, steel tanks. And this is where it gets really interesting. Concrete. Yes. Yes. Big concrete. Some of them look like giant eggs that they put the wine in. And it can add a little minerality to it, especially if the concrete is a new tank. Because what happens with concrete is when you put, and this happens with wood too, when you put the wine in fresh concrete, it's not sealed yet. The wine will seal it. So that first batch that goes in there will be probably pretty highly minerality in the wine. Or the second batch,
concrete, it leaches those flavors out. That's why whiskey, when they put them in oak barrels and stuff like that, tastes oaky and stuff, because they're leaching those flavors out of that. So
exactly. But there's also, and they do this with wine too, and whiskey and rum. Anytime they do a wooden barrel, they can do it just natural. Like they make the barrel and then they put the whatever into it. And there you go. And then what happens is you get a chemical reaction between the wood and the alcohol. And yes, the flavors leach into that, but the wine leaches into the wood and kind of seals it, so that the next batch you use for it, you're not going to get as big of a chemical reaction, because the wood has been sealed by the wine or whatever alcohol has been in there, the rum, whatever. But they also do something else. So it just doesn't have a woody flavor. Sometimes it'll have a toasty flavor. And it's where they actually burn the inside of the barrels. And they have 3 different levels. They have a light toasting. It's like your toaster, a light toasting, a medium toasting, and a dark toasting. And so when you're looking at whiskey, if it's a light whiskey, it was in a light toasted barrel. Medium whiskey, medium toasted barrel. Dark whiskey, it was in a dark toasted barrel. Wine, it doesn't affect the color, but it does affect the flavor. So if you're ever reading the tasting notes on a wine and it says toast, you know it's been in a barrel that has been toasted.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's
I'm learning all kinds of stuff from you, Linda. And I
Yeah,
hope
so-
you guys are as well, because you don't just get this stuff normally, right? You're going to get it here at the Hips in Your Life community. Just saying.
Yep.
Tell your friends.
Yep. And so here's another thing. This is where the winemaker really has control of how the wine is going to end. So the winemaker, a good winemaker, knows how they want it to taste in the end. So they keep the end in mind. And so they will do things like move it from a wooden barrel into steel, or from steel into wood, or from clay into steel, or they'll move it from vessel to vessel while it's aging. And it will add different things to it. If a wine is in stainless steel tanks, and you can really taste this in whites, it will be if you ever see a bottle that says the wine is bright and crisp, in all likelihood, it was aged in steel. Because for whatever reason, the steel with the wine will make it much more acidic. And really, it is that very summery, great crisp. Sometimes you'll get a really lemony flavor. Right away, it was very good chance it was in a steel tank for the majority of its aging life. Yeah, each thing that they do has a special reaction with the wine. And so that winemaker knows the reaction he wants or she wants. And so they'll leave it in a wooden barrel for a couple of weeks. And then they'll be, okay, that's all the woodiness I want in my wine. I'm going to put it in clay now. And I'm going to get that clay flavor in there. So they know what they want to do, and they know how they want it to taste when they're ending. So they will move the wine. And we're not talking 750 milliliter bottle that we're moving from one container to another. We're talking gallons. We're talking hundreds, if not thousands of gallons of wine that they're moving from vessel to vessel through its aging. So it's pretty, and that's just the first stage of aging.
I'm guessing they have big machines to do this, but in the olden days, they probably didn't. They probably did it by bucket.
That would be my guess. Yeah. Or you can leach with hose. You can cook with a hose and then vacuum it to get that suction going, and it'll just drain. Let's see. Online. Go through some notes. So keeping in mind that the winemaker has a specific flavor that they're looking for. What happens once it's aged to a certain place, they can still play with it. If it's not quite what they thought they wanted, they can start to blend. And this is where they'll take a Merlot that they think, oh, it doesn't quite, the Merlot's a little sharp on the end. So maybe what I'll do is I'll put a little Barbera in there, maybe 10% Barbera in there, because Barbera tends to be a smoother finish on it. Maybe that's what I want. I like the Merlot, but it's too sharp on the back end. I'm not happy with that. So I'm going to put a little Barbera in there to see if we can smooth out that finish, because I want a smoother finish on this Merlot. So they'll start, because they know what each grape profile is, they can start to blend the varieties to get that perfect wine that they're looking for. Now, not all of them do blend different types of grapes together. Sometimes they'll actually blend the same grape together from different batches. So if they have an aging let's say they had some Cab Sauv that they were aging from last year and it's still in there, still aging, and they have this year's batch, and this year's batch isn't quite what they want, they may put a little bit of last year's batch in it to get it to the flavor that they want. And how do we know if they've done that? It will not have a year on the bottle. So if it's a Merlot or a Cab Sauv, if it's a single grape wine and there is no year on the bottle, that means that they have blended from different harvests, different years of harvest to get that wine to where they want it to be. And a red wine, when it just says red wine, you're rarely going to see a year on a bottle that just says red wine or just says white wine, because they're blending from different years, from different harvests, from different vineyards. They're blending a lot to get what they want in that red or the white. But if it doesn't have a year on it, that's what also sometimes you can get wines that have. So this one is from Napa County. So we could have also, it could have gone even more. It could have given us the name of the vineyard that it came from. But because we don't have the name of the vineyard, we know that this probably is a blend of different vineyards, all from Napa County, but different vineyards from Napa County. So there's a lot and we can go into we'll go into the labels on another thing, but there's a lot you can tell from the label just if you know what they're thinking when they're blending the wines. You'll know a lot about that. The label is telling you secrets without telling you outright what it's doing. All right. So the final step is before they bottle it is called clarifying. And in the US, this is a big deal. Americans, for whatever reason, do not want crap in their wine. They don't want to see things floating around in the bottle. They just don't. They want it to be clear and clean. That's only because that's how we like it. We drink orange juice with pulp. We don't want to drink our wine with pulp in it, though.
Interesting.
Even though we could. So it wouldn't hurt anything if it was still in there. But especially in the US. Now, some smaller vineyards, you may not see that. You may actually see some things floating around in the wine. That's fine. That's totally fine. It's actually good stuff that's in there that have been under normal circumstances in the US. It's been taken out during the clarifying process. So it could be, what you might see on the bottle is the word find. So they can put fining agents in the bottles, like egg whites. Egg whites, those little things, the floaters will stick to those egg whites. And then they can just pull them out. They put them through a screen. And the screen catches everything. And then the clean wine falls through. And then that's the wine that they bottle.
Interesting.
And we do that here, but it's not a big deal if they don't do it. So that's just what we do. And then we bottle it. And when we bottle the wine, we're bottling it in a situation where we let as little air in there as possible. This is about right. Just that tiny little bit of air in there, because they're basically vacuum sealed. So it's just that tiny little bit of air. What that does is that allows it to slowly continue to age, because wine needs oxygen to age, and it will continue to age in the bottle. But because there's so little oxygen, it will age very slowly. Reds can age in a bottle easily for about 5 years. And as long as, if it's got a natural cork in it, like this one does, it's a natural cork. You can tell by looking that it's natural. As long as you store it on the side to keep that cork moist, you can age a white for 2 to 3 years, and then a red for up to 5. And this is after you purchase it. But a winemaker will let it age for a little while before they release it.
What happens if you
So
don't store it on its side and the cork does dry out?
it will allow oxygen into the wine, and and sometimes bacteria will get in there, and then it will ruin the wine. So yeah, oxygen is not wine's friend. It is not at all. They don't like each other. So a winemaker will keep it in a bottle for a couple years. And so when you go to anywhere to buy wine, just showed up today a 2018 wine, that means that they were storing it for what is that? That's 6 years. They decided that they needed to keep it stored in the bottle before they released it for 6 years. And that's totally up to the winemaker how long he thinks. Now, then once you get it, you can let it age for a few more years if you want, but you don't have to if you don't want to. It will taste a little bit different. In my house, we do let them age for a while. Not so much the whites, but the reds. We do let them age for 3, 4, 5 years. And we have found that it does make a significant difference in how yummy, and yes, that is a wine term, yummy it is. All right. So what other questions do you have about winemaking? Or yes, because I know that's a lot. That is a lot.
Is that a lot? When was the first bottle of wine ever bottled? Do you know?
Oh, no, I don't know. I know that wine has been around for about 8,000 years, and they weren't making glass back then. So I believe it was probably put in clay. Yeah,
Was it clay flask type bottles?
that's what my guess would be.
Let's see. I Googled it. Let's see if this has the first recorded evidence of wine production, the earliest evidence of actual bottled wine, however. So it says 7,000 to 6,000 BCE in the region of present day Iran was where it was first made. However, bottling in wine containers started to become more common in the 17th century in Europe. Process of using glass bottles with corks to seal the wine began to gain popularity around that time. So while there isn't a precise date for the first bottle of wine being bottled, it can be generally placed within the context of the development of glass bottled technology in the 17th century.
Yeah. So
there.
But they were carrying it around a lot earlier than that, what was it, a couple weeks ago, whenever we talked about, what is wine? Okay, which you guys are always free to go back and pull up any of these because we record all of them.
Yep.
And you can go back and just educate yourself or answer any questions that you have in any of the previous ones that we've recorded. And I think it might have been the first one, the What is Wine one that we take that class. We talked about why they invented wine how they drank it. And it was actually a water additive initially because water was not good back then. So
Right.
way back when. So it was a way to be able to drink water safely and to hydrate because we all, as humans, we need a lot of water to hydrate. But bacteria and whatever that lives in water can make us really sick. So that wine, the chemical reaction and the antibacterial quality that wines naturally have, that the grapes naturally have, are passed into the wine. And then when they mix that with the water and herbs, there were some herbs that they would put in there, it made the water safe to drink. So we do know that, and they had to be able to carry it around. But I think you're right. It was probably in clay pots at that time, or clay flasks of some sort at that time.
And they carried them on their shoulders and on top of their heads. And all right. How are consumer preferences influencing the industry? So are grape growers growing for what people want to drink, or are grape growers growing what they know and what will grow in their area, or both?
Ooh, actually both. So interesting enough. So here's a story about that. The Zinfandel grape. So if you were around in the 80s and 90s and going to bars or parties or whatever, white Zinfandel was beyond popular. So beyond popular. So, and white Zinfandel is actually made from the Zinfandel grape that is a red grape, but it's a rosé. So what it is they make it as if they were making a white wine, but they throw the skins in for a minute just to get the color and a little flavor, and then they pull the skins out. Zinfandel, prior to that time period, had fallen out of favor. And because in the 70s, Cabernet Sauvignon became really popular, super popular. And the Cabernet Sauvignon grape is a really easy grape to grow. It's the most grown red grape in the entire world. So, because of the ease of it growing and how such delicious wines that it could make, prior to that becoming so popular, Zinfandel was super, super popular, but then it fell out of favor. Believe it or not, the white Zin saved the Zinfandel vine because what grape growers will do, just like any farmer will do, they will only grow what they know they can sell. And what they don't think they can sell, they will yank those vines and they will plant new vines, even knowing that it will take 3 years before that vine can give them a harvestable grape. Yes. So their
Eugenics
ears,
to the rescue.
yes, their ears are to the market and they will yank a vine or a type of vine. So if white Zin hadn't been so popular, we may not even have the Zinfandel vine anymore. We could have killed off a type of grape because of the market demand.
That's crazy
It is crazy.
and interesting.
So white Zin saves Zinfandel. Yay. And Zinfandel now is finding favor again. A lot of people really like a Zinfandel wine. And I think some of that is because it's not, it doesn't have exactly the same tasting profile as a Cabernet Sauvignon does. It is enough different that you're absolutely drinking something different. It's a little bit lighter body, but it still has that heavy flavor. It's something you can drink Zinfandel with a nice barbecued steak, or a grilled steak. You can drink Zinfandel with that and it holds its own with it. So it's another option if you're just, I don't feel like a Cabernet Sauvignon. I've had that too much. I want something else. Zinfandel is a really great option to choose instead of that. So yes, growers are only growing what they know they can sell and they keep their ear to the market to what people are buying. So yes to both of those questions.
Interesting. Okay. I think that wraps that about up.
All right. Thank you for having me back again this week. I love talking about wine. I could talk about wine for weeks and weeks, which is
Here, I thought it was just me that you loved.
I do love you too. You're right. It's my excuse to come talk to you every week.
And I love having you on here. I love that we can have these open, honest conversations and bring some happiness to people because wine is a big part of the economy, right? Look at the ramifications that wine had during COVID. That's all you saw on social media was people like just chugging down wine because they were like, what else do I have to do besides day drink? Yeah. I'm sure that the wine industry saw a huge boost from between 2020 and now with wine. And so it's our job, even if you're finding any entertainment in my stupid ramblings and Linda's very intelligent lessons within wine, share it with your kids. Educate your kids about wine. It's an important part of our history. It's an important part of our front. Even if you don't drink, just part of the economy in itself is an important part. Be sure to enjoy learning this and then be sure to join us next week because we are going to be taste testing some wine next week, right? No?
We are.
Or is that the week after next week?
Oh, you're right. It's week after next week. Yeah.
So next week, what are we doing?
1, 2, 3. Oh, how to taste wine.
Oh, So we're not tasting wine, we're just learning how to taste it.
Yes.
Okay.
That's next week. How to taste wine, which you can have anything in your glass when I show you how to taste wine, because it doesn't matter what's in there. I just have to show you how to do it.
Got it. Got it. Does that mean that we're going to be spitting stuff out?
It's totally up to you if you want to spit it out. Most people, I'll tell you why they spit wine out is because they don't want to get drunk. So if you have your one bottle of wine, you don't have to spit it out. You're not going to, if you drink so much of it that, yeah, you don't want to spit it out. You won't want to. So
Great. Maybe I'll have tequila in my glass. For you, you do not know, I'm allergic to wine. I'm allergic to the sulfites in wine. So I wish there was some kind, because I think even non-alcoholic wine still ferments the fruit in order to
I bet it does. Yeah.
create that. So I think I am staying clear of those things as well lately. By the way, if you happen to go out and are drinking and you see someone who's drinking and they're not choking, but they're turning bright red, chances are of them being allergic to the sulfites in the wine is possible. So if you guys see me out and I happen to have a glass of wine and I'm turning bright red, hand me a Benadryl. We will see everybody next week when we learn how to taste wine. Linda Aivalotis, tell people where they can order wine from you at.
You can order it from scoutandcellar.com. So scout and cellar.com /Linda A1. Yes, like the steak sauce. Linda A1.
Okay. And I'll put that at the end of this video as well
Okay.
when I go back in and put our names in. And in the meantime, guys, head over to livecommunity.online. And if it doesn't go there for some reason, you might have to type in the www. And on the 5th of September coming up, before we see Linda again, we have Teepa Snow joining us. And Teepa is going to be talking about memory, which is a huge conversation to have. How many different types of memory that our brain can handle and how to improve having better memory. And we're not talking Alzheimer's and dementia at this point. We're talking everyday use. So every one of y'all should be there joining us and learning some more about that. So head over to, again, livecommunity.online. And just, I think it's the first block on the page. Scroll down just a little bit and you'll see Teepa Snow's picture, the advertisement for that. Just click register and join us, because that's going to be a great conversation as well that I would love for you guys to join us, as well as all the rest of the classes that you can register for as well. So again, Linda, thanks for joining us today and teaching us how wine is made. It's been really interesting and very educational.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.